Yes, we are the energies. And we wanted to talk to you about energy. As a matter of fact, the irony there is not lost on us. Now, we are called the energies because that is all we are, much like you. You are one with Source, you are one with all of creation. You are one with the divine, whatever you wish it to be. We are called the energies because we have never mm, incarnated in a physical body. We hover around about and we watch, we learn, we listen, we mm, take note, if you will, of everything around. And what we would like to remind you again is while you are one with Source, you are energy. And what energy is, is frequency. So, what you wish to create in your life has to come and match your frequency, your energy. So if you say something is going to be hard, you can expect that it will be hard. If you think something will be doable, and if you have a good attitude as it is, as it were, then you will have a fairly relatively easy time. Now, easy and hard are only about attitudes, and attitudes are another term for energy. Do you have an energy that goes positive and high, or do you have an energy that goes low and negative? There is not better or worse. We do not want you to think of your teenage years when your parents or your teachers condemned you for having a bad attitude. No, you did not have a bad attitude. You saw things differently, and every generation sees things differently. If not, then there would be no evolution, no moving ahead. No, do not take evolution to mean the theory of evolution. Things need to evolve. Otherwise, what is the point of being in a physical body if you are not going to raise the vibration, raise the frequency, or make things easier? The one who we speak through today has gone through a time where, when she was in school originally, she was writing with ink and paper. And now, when she is finishing her degree, she is working on a laptop. Now, she could even do most of her schoolwork on her phone if she wishes to. So, there has been a quick transition in the past 30 years of what has gone on and what has gone before. So, this is the thing. So if one were to say, knock everything back, regress all the way back to when she was in high school 30 plus years ago, things would be very challenging. There were very few people who had cell phones. And if you see cell phones of that time period in the 90s, mid early 90s, well, what they looked like, they were gigantic compared to the little things you have. And they did not text and they did not send pictures. Now, maybe if you were military or some sort of secret agent type of thing, you may have had some sort of covert thing that could do all sorts of amazing things. But as it was the very few people who had cell phones, again, there was not a lot of things to be done with them. And oftentimes they were in people's cars, as a matter of fact, unless people carried them in a big, gigantic case, something the size of almost a typewriter. And many of you, if you did not grow up years ago, may not even really know what a typewriter looks like. That might be an analogy that does not work for you. So, if everything were to get pushed back to the way it was before, things would be very challenging. So, that is the thing. you are moving at an exponential rate, and as it should be indeed, because at some point the goal is to raise the frequency high enough that one can just think and create. When one understands that their energy is all they need to co-create consciously. So we would like you to be mindful, not in a way that you bring fear, because fear's energy is very, very low. That is a low vibrating energy, where love's energy is very, very high. We would like you to, as much as you can, bring yourself out of fear. Now, this is the thing. We know for some of you it may be challenging. So think of things that there are charts, there are things that you could write out. Say fear is at 0 energy and love is at 100, because often humans love 0 to 100 or 1 to 10. But think of something like that, and we would like you, if you are the type that wants to put stuff pen to paper, you want to go old school or retro if it is, you can imagine building steps from fear to love, and think of emotions that get closer to love. That would be steps stepping up to love, and then number it. You can go by tens, you can go by twos, you can go by ones if you want, and go through. And that way, when you get yourself into fear, you can look and go, what is practical? And you can, of course, do this on a computer or your phone. What is practical for me when I'm currently in this place of fear? What would be a practical next step? Because often, if you're trying to go, yes, from fear to love, you'll end up going past, down, reverse past fear. So, say, even if you'd like to do it on a number line, you'd be heading into the negatives. Going, because when you put yourself, not only are you putting pressure on yourself to not be fearful, which is probably what you have learned your whole entire life, is to, people often yell at people to stop being afraid, which, how does that help? So we would like you to really look at what is doable. If you move from fear, maybe fear, to anger, that can be a good step forward. Now, we like you to not stay in anger forever, because that still doesn't resonate. There's still fear sort of attached, but it's a little step forward. But, find the next emotion that's a little closer to love and that feels a little better. And some of you may have a problem with anger. Some of you, anger may feel worse than fear because, again, you were raised often as children, depending on if you were raised in a religious sense, that anger, and especially towards adults or power, was not acceptable. That anger wasn't what good little boys or girls felt. There are many, many things that you have problems with in yourself, many fears you have, many doubts you have. So, fear, the next step might be doubt or worry is a possibility, if not anger, because sometimes anger can be used to, okay, write it all out. Write out what you're feeling. Write out really hard. Get it out. And then maybe you'll be into contemplation, or whatever moves next for you, because every human is different. What are the next steps? Where can you go? The same thing, you can do this with depression. You can do this anxiety, depression, both are attached to fear. They are just different reactions to fear. And they are different. Anxiety and depression are actually kind of the same energy, just different, if you could understand that. Because one often leads to the other. because most people who have depression also have anxiety. And most people who have anxiety, once they wear themselves out, because anxiety is a very fast moving thing, but once they wear themselves out, they may fall into a state of depression, whether it be a physically ill symptoms of depression or feeling depressed. So they tend to be almost mm, different sides of the same coin, if you will. So you can do this with anything that would rate down at fear, because fear could look like, again, depression. Because if you're afraid that you cannot have or do or be what you want, you might feel depressed. If you're afraid you can't get, because afraid and fear, when you are in fear, you're afraid. So when you fear, there's anxiety. So again, these guys right next to one on top of the other is how she is seeing this. So if you see fear and then on one side anxiety, the other side depression, maybe one's above, one's below. But again, steps. Think of what you can do next, because this needs to be gradual. You cannot keep swinging and fleeing yourself from one thing to the next, because, again, just like anxiety eventually either causes you to be physically ill or causes you depression when you are worn out, then what happens is you just go spinning off in a circle. And so if you try too hard and then you put too much pressure on yourself, again, you end up even farther back than fear, farther back than anxiety, farther back than depression. And you might not feel like, how is that even possible? But there are deeper and deeper versions of the same thing. There are different shades. So again, just go to the next thing that feels better. Move through. There are people who talk about energy and different numbers of energy, that certain activities, certain things bring you from one energy to a next energy. However, you do not need to make this as complicated as all that. Again, just feelings. You can have activities. Again, moving from one, if you have a habit, if you have an addiction, that lowers your energy because you're going to go into fear. Because often addiction, there is a fear, there is an underlying fear. You would not be addicted to anything if you were not afraid of something. It doesn't mean you're cowering like a baby in, a little kid clutching their teddy bear, but addiction does often cover up a fear that you are not enough, fear that you can't do this, fear that you are stuck, feel that you're always going to feel this way. Fear is very different. There are different shades, there are different colors of fear. So, another way to think is you might want to draw a circle around fear and then draw rays and think about all the different things that don't feel good that are based on fear. Fear might look different for every person. Fear does not mean you are shaking in your boots. Fear is the underlying cause of most of the things that you feel bad, whether it's worry, doubt, whatever it may be, anxiety. Again, these are all fear. So find your version of fear, whatever you describe it as. If you describe it as anxiety, if you describe it as depression, if you describe it as worry, doubt, an addiction, how can you get from that energy to a better energy, to a better energy? And again, little steps, one step at a time, because the other thing one needs to know, if you go from fear to love really quickly, you have not grown, you have not matured, and your system is going to have a hard time accepting it. It's going to feel really weird. So, for instance, if people who say when you're sick, you generally get better little by little, you don't just automatically get a shot most of the time, and then boom, you're good. Everything's healed, you're perfect, because there is time for things to mend, there is time to heal, and it's actually a good thing that we can't just pop from one to another. Because yes, you can have moments of you're in fear and then you're in love, but it doesn't last. The same like when people have spontaneous enlightenments or when they use certain plant medicines or certain meditations, or you go on a retreat or you go to some workshop where you feel yay, 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 rah, 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 this is awesome. And then mm, things go back to normal and then you feel a drop. You may feel actually worse. You might have raised where you are, but it might feel worse because you went from this to this. So keep going back and forth at such highs and lows, just like using certain drugs. That cocaine, it takes you really high and then it drops you really low. So that is where people often keep using certain drugs because you're really, really high. And then when you're done with that drug, when that's no longer in your system and you're no longer high, it can feel really, really awful. So, again, to keep that extremes, again, take these little steps, write it out, think it out, do what you need to do. You can do things, but find stuff that you can do steps at a time. Find little rituals that work for you, and they might change constantly. It might, this works for me right now to get me from this to this. So you might be like, yes, sound helps me. Yes, movement helps me. Actually, as a being in a physical or suit, you want a wide range of things. You want things like a breathing practice, maybe a meditation practice, maybe a physical exercise, a spiritual, some sort of reading, some sort of studying. So you want to be well rounded in the suit. You do not want to just be someone who sits for hours and hours and meditates and never brings this forward into the world. That's the other part. Once you practice your energy, once you move to the next thing, so say you either write, you figure out a way to get you to the next step for your energy, then be in that energy, practice in that energy, work in that energy, share that energy. There's so many things you can do because, again, if you want to be a conscious co creator, you have to be higher vibration. That is plain and simple. An unconscious co creator, you do not have to be high vibrational. If you do not like how your life is, you have been unconsciously co creating. You have been thinking things, and it doesn't have to be the same thing. You might be worried about, say, your arm, yet, so nothing actually happens to your arm, but maybe something happens to your tire. It doesn't always end up being the same thing. The thing that you are worrying about is not always the thing that's going to happen. So you might think about, oh, I worry about this, blah, 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 right? Well, then it can be something else, something in a different realm that has nothing to do with the thing that you're worried about. You might be worrying about your health, but your finances are suffering. Or you might be worrying about your finances, but your health suffers. It doesn't have to be the same exact thing. It is energy, and energy goes where it goes. And again, if you're scattered or if you're in fear or if you're feeling low vibrational, then of course you cannot consciously co create. So we would like you to mind this, but again, mind it in a way, mindfulness, meaning loving, being careful with yourself, treating yourself as though you were either a small child. How would you treat a small child who is new to learning about this? You wouldn't beat them. You wouldn't punch them. Say, if you were trying to teach a kid to walk, you wouldn't kick them in the head because they stumbled and fell. Or you wouldn't stomp on them because they stumbled and fell. Of course you wouldn't. That would be, however, you do that to yourself. This is not an exaggeration. Most of you do that or worse to yourself. Or if children don't resonate with you, think about some small, cute, fluffy animal that you love, because some humans say they like animals better than humans. That is something, again, to work on because that is not a high vibrational energy either. Because you should, if you are a well-rounded human, of course, you are source, but you are an earth suit. But if you wish to be a well-rounded human, helping advance humankind, then you need to not feel that way. That is, you can see, of course, how that is not high vibrational. But yes, animals are much more loving, kind, sweet, and you can put them in a crate, or you can put them in the backyard, or you cannot do that generally with humans. So we understand on one hand, but we would like you to be aware of everything you say and everything you do, but not in a way that you punish yourself. So treat yourself like you would something that was small, something that was vulnerable, something that you were given caretakership over, and treat it with love. Treat yourself as you are moving through the process of going from lower vibration to high vibration, because you cannot beat high vibration into yourself. And if you grew up with the spare the child or spare the rod, spoil the child, you may have the wrong idea of what you need to do to yourself. You may not do this to another child, or you may not do this to an animal, you may not do this to anybody else, but we know, we watch, we see everything. We see inside you do this to yourself. Beating only helps rugs. That is the only thing that prospers from a beating. That is the only thing that feels better, that works with a beating. Nothing else does. So treat yourself right. Look, it is a journey. The whole point is to journey, and you have the best journey, because when you do this from a place of love, when you do this with gentleness, and you move from one step to the next step, and you are kind and you are cheering yourself on, then it will go much better for you. You will feel better. We love you. We wish you well. Until we speak again.